The importance of relationship in music education. Everything we do and everything I've said here at Michigan Academy of Folk Music has already implied the importance of relationship to education, but the subject does deserve some specific attention. It could naturally be claimed that a meaningful relationship between teacher and student is one of the most important prerequisites for a meaningful education. Having said that, I would point out that the inverse claim is probably the truer and more helpful one to make. As instructors of music, we are of course deeply concerned with the continued musical growth and development of our students. It is worth considering, however, whether the relationships formed in the process are a side effect or a byproduct of the learning process, or as I might contend, whether they are actually the main point. Music is an inherently social activity, and making music together with others can be an express route to meaningful connection and intimacy. Whatever the end result of this musical experience might be for the students involved, and let us hope that it is a robust and lifelong relationship with music. The relationships formed between teacher and student and between the students themselves are perhaps the most important fruit of the time spent learning together. When we lead group classes, as we do here at Michigan Academy of Folk Music, from the very beginning, we can help to facilitate a vibrant social atmosphere and to foster ever-deepening relationships between the students in our classes. This will not only help to make it a more fun and meaningful experience for everyone, but as I've discussed before, the relationships formed around music help to weave music deeply into the fabric of our lives, providing a more meaningful context for music making, and more on context in another video. To help to create a more fertile relational environment in our classes, we teachers can act as social gardeners, sowing seeds of relationship in every casual interaction we have, and throughout each class whenever possible. To start, that involves our genuine interest in the lives of each student. The simple things like eye contact and a warm greeting to each student as they arrive, those things should go without saying. We can get more creative and perhaps a little bit craftier as well. To start, I would recommend asking very specific questions as often as possible. And importantly, taking steps to help you remember the answers given. My interns and apprentices here at Michigan Academy of Folk Music know that in the first few weeks of each school year, I have them carry around little notebooks and writing specific things. Johnny has a pet snake. Rachel likes to swim, specifically to give you a basis upon which to build relationship and make connections. So it may be useful to write things down in a notebook like this. Easy, generic questions about family life and household culture can be a good way to start or end each class, or to transition between teaching topics. Funny and unusual questions can yield interesting and memorable answers, and that facilitates connection between students, as well as simply promoting a fun classroom environment. Any creative teacher should be able to pop off dozens of strange and funny questions with minimal effort. What is the strangest thing you've ever smelled? If you could have any pet, which animal would it be and what would you name it? If you could have lunch with a character in a book, who would you have lunch with? What flavor of chewing gum would you most like to invent? In addition to these types of questions, it is always helpful to be equally crafty in connecting students with others in the class. Many children do this naturally, but because the student's attention is generally focused toward the front of the class, the time spent connecting with other students can be more difficult to come by, especially for shy students. We can help to bridge this gap by aiming to redirect questions toward the end goal of connection, even if it can feel a little bit contrived at times. Johnny, you have a pet dog. Katie, don't you also have a dog? Do your dogs ever create any mischief around the house? This creates a shared experience and an opportunity for sharing. Often a third student will interject about his cat or her bird and share a story about pet mischief in his or her home. Isaac, I like your shirt. Did you visit Colorado? Sophia, don't you have family in Colorado? I would like to visit. Do you have a favorite thing to do in the mountains? Again, connection is created between individual students who have been questioned. Additionally, we allow students to share experiences which may be unique, which makes them feel noticed and heard. Over time, this creates the feeling of meaningful individual identity within the class and the feeling of being known by the teacher and fellow students. These opportunities for connection come frequently and are all too frequently squandered or missed entirely. In every class, we should be making an investment into the relational bank of the class. This shared trust allows us to ask more of the students in terms of vulnerability, and if they feel secure, cared for, and known, they're often willing to try new things without the assurance of success. When we know we are among friends, we are less afraid of failure, which emboldens us to try, fail, and try again, knowing that we are accepted regardless. This trust is a precious commodity. And again, while that trust is of course helpful for learning, it's not simply a fortunate byproduct, it is the point. In order to be engaged at this level with creating a social dynamic, we need to focus our attention outward and not inward. It can be natural for teachers of all experience levels, but particularly those just beginning, to be particularly inwardly focused while teaching. Am I doing a good job? Am I teaching this right? Are the students understanding me? Am I talking too fast? Do I look silly up here? These questions can be important, but they should be considered before or after class. During class, the goal should be to be completely present and to give 100% of your attention to the students. This takes conscious practice, and the question-asking habits must be cultivated intentionally. Additionally, the habit of observation is essential. We should be constantly observing each student and trying to determine by their body language or facial expressions, among other things, how they're doing, both musically and socially. This will help us to give more meaningful feedback, focus our attention where it is most needed, and guide the class at the pace which is best for the greatest number of students. Now, just in case some of you are bristling and thinking that I'm getting a little bit tender here and where's the music education content, one really important thing that I want to point out is, as I mentioned, this habit of attention among teachers, it trains you to have the habit of attention in everything you do. So if you can isolate individual responses to the way you're explaining things within the class, that makes it much more helpful to be able to teach them well. But also at the same time, if you can train your ears to hear, oh, Susie's out of tune, so-and-so is rushing, somebody on this side of the class seems to be really struggling with getting this D and they're playing a C sharp instead. That type of training is an ear training skill, which isn't exactly what people go through in music school, in ear training classes. But in terms of a practical, applicational, contextual ear training as a music teacher, it's really an incredible thing. And I've found it crosses over really well to engaging as a musician with other musicians in performance, in orchestral and chamber music. It's a really helpful skill to learn. And finally, as far as those of you who may be hearing me say relationships are the point, you may be hearing something I'm not implying, which is, who cares if they get better? I'm not so concerned about musical excellence. I'm more concerned about smiles. Well, the thing that I have found over and over again so far in my career, and particularly here at Michigan Academy of Folk Music, is kind of what I said about if you make a deposit into a relational account among your individual students and among the community, you then can expect withdrawals. And I would probably suggest that many teachers who are quick to say, student 1, you're rushing, student 2, you're dragging, you're out of tune, you're sharp, you're flat, you clearly didn't practice this. They expect that they're being the rigorous teacher, the one who's expecting the most of their students, the disciplinarian, the one who really wants to push their students to attain a high level of mastery and excellence. I think often the reason this doesn't succeed is because they haven't yet earned the right to make those criticisms through relationship. So I have found that students with whom I've cared about their pets at home, I've cared about their vacation that they took, or the t-shirt about the Smoky Mountains that they wore, or the fact that they like cars, or whatever it is, and invested in those things, first of all, I've earned a certain amount of trust with that student to then later on say, hey, you're rushing, buddy, or you clearly didn't practice this week, or I expect better from you. And they will respond not defiantly or defensively, but they'll be open to receive that feedback. Also, the relationship is an incredible way to bring people into observing, modeling that a life in music is an attractive and worthwhile thing to pursue. And so those students often who may be the least likely to naturally jump right into pursuing excellence on the violin or the guitar or whatever the case is, the relationship is a way of modeling this is something worth pursuing. This excellence is something that's worth giving yourself to. Hard work, hard practice. And as I mentioned in the context versus content video that I made, the people who have a relational context for music and possibly aren't pushed as hard immediately toward excellence often tend to be the ones that end up with the greatest level of mastery over the course of years and over the course of a lifetime. Plus, they end up walking away with a lot of meaningful relationships around music and around other things. Thanks for listening.